Hello everyone, welcome to week number 4 of Organizing the Panic. I'm Roddy, and this week we're going to talk about supplements. So we're going to talk about supplements in the context of hair loss, and we're going to talk about supplements that actually work and that you can measure and identify about things on your body, as well as lab tests. So you're not just like taking a magic mix of pills hoping for it to do something. For instance, you could take something, then go measure it and see if it did anything. Some of it is going to be review from last week, especially week number 3, but this is extremely important because talking about taking things like thyroid hormone, it's really important that I put in as much detail as possible. So forgive me if you're like, oh my god, I've already heard this. But I think it's really important, especially when talking about thyroid hormone, to get all the information out there, and a lot of it was in last week, so we're going to include it in this week too. As always, if you have any questions, please ask them below and I'll get to them as soon as possible. If you don't feel comfortable sharing the question below, email me at dannyroddy@gmail.com. Week 4 is all about supplements. We're going to talk about thyroid hormone, T3 and T4. We're going to talk about the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, and K. We're going to talk about gelatin, the other half of the animal besides the muscle meat, aspirin, which is a controversial supplement for hair loss, salt, and then wrap it up with red light. In 2008, I considered myself quite the supplement connoisseur. Consuming upwards of 25 to 50 supplements per meal, I hand-selected only the finest ingredients to formulate what I believed would be the most effective regimen to combat hair loss. While this approach looked great on paper, it had little real-world value. For instance, supplements often cause low blood sugar, intestinal irritation, or intense anxiety. Eventually, I traversed from a focus on supplements to focusing on a rational diet to support the metabolic rate and provide full nutrition. However, due to the extreme amount of factors working against those with pattern baldness, I don't think it's unreasonable to employ self-diagnostics in order to explore supplements that may provide tangible benefits. Supplements aren't natural. This is an accurate statement. However, if we were having this conversation in the US before the 1980s, there's a good chance a majority of people were supplementing thyroid hormone in the form of actual thyroid gland being incorporated into traditional foods like sausages, fish head soup, etc. However, because the FDA made this practice of selling and using the thyroid gland of animals in food illegal, the stigma that thyroid hormones are a risky drug persists. Why would anyone need a thyroid supplement? Like I mentioned, the balding individual has a variety of factors working against them in their environment. One of those factors is not only the chronic ingestion of the unsaturated fats in the typical Western diet, but the accumulation of body fat that reflects the type of fat consumed over a lifetime. During stress or when energy demands exceed the ability of tissues to generate energy, unsaturated fats are liberated into the blood, inhibiting the ability of tissues to respond to thyroid hormone, get energized, and perform their normal physiological functions. In the case of pattern baldness, this de-energized state contributes to the pathological changes seen in the hair follicle. How do I know if I could benefit from a thyroid supplement? Environmental changes can be difficult to quantify without objective data. In my experience, temperature is one of the most revealing measurements and is often low in those with pattern baldness. While often considered some kind of pseudoscience, the body temperature is associated with significant shifts in the metabolic rate. A marginal increase in temperature is associated with a 10 to 13% increase in the resting metabolic rate, increasing the conversion of glucose to carbon dioxide or efficient energy. And the resting metabolic rate is largely regulated by thyroid hormones. Likewise, substances working in the opposite direction of thyroid hormone, like estrogen, appear to lower the body temperature. The pituitary hormone prolactin, which is increased by estrogen, also lowers temperature and the rate of metabolism. One of the most important mechanisms of the adaptive effect of prolactin is its ability to suppress thyroid function, thus decreasing the metabolism level, which results in the reduction of oxygen consumption. Measuring the temperature can be done cheaply at home and without a physician. Simply obtain a thermometer, your preference, and place it snugly under your armpit upon waking for 10 minutes. A reading below the normal range of 97.8 to 98.6 strongly suggests low thyroid function. I think consistency is more important than accuracy of the thermometer, which will vary. Charting the temperature in the morning, after breakfast, and the afternoon for about a week can reveal rhythmic changes in the metabolic rate. The goal is to increase the temperature with lifestyle adjustments. According to Dr. Pete, the mid-morning rise of the temperature to 98.6 is the most important temperature reading. High temperature correlates with warm extremities like hands, feet, and nose, and a relaxed alertness. Additionally, the resting pulse rate is useful in combination with temperature readings. While mainline medicine is certain that everyone should have a low pulse rate like healthy athletes, an increased resting pulse rate suggests that nutrients in the blood are adequately nourishing tissues, allowing them to maintain their organization. In a stressful situation, however, both pulse rate and the temperature can be misleading. For instance, after breakfast, it is not uncommon for the body temperature to plummet due to the general anti-stress effects of eating. This may suggest a higher functioning of cortisol, the stress hormone associated with pattern baldness, and low thyroid function. By breaking down tissue protein, cortisol can elevate body temperature. Likewise, the pulse may drop after breakfast if the metabolism was being maintained by both cortisol and adrenaline. An excess of adrenaline is often associated with cold hands, feet, and nose, and feelings of anxiety and clear urine. So before taking a thyroid supplement, measure your thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. The pituitary hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, is sometimes referred to as the gold standard in evaluating thyroid function. This is ironic as the TSH test has gone through a lot of changes over the years. While 7.0 micro international units per milliliter was considered normal at one point, years later the cutoff was 6.4. Still later, the cutoff was moved to 5.5 and then 4.2. While taking a thyroid supplement, some doctors prefer the lower limit of TSH to be 1.0, while some others are comfortable with 0.5. Thyroid specialists in the University of California Medical Center in San Francisco like to see the corrected level around 0.2, which is slightly below the normal range of 0.3 to 3.0. Regardless of lab values, it's helpful to think about any given hormone in context. Pituitary hormone like TSH increases in stress and aging and tends to interfere with efficient respiratory energy promoted by thyroid hormone by liberating free fatty acids and decreasing the rate of metabolism. The currently accepted range of 0.3 to 3.0 seems to be too lenient, however. For example, one study found that normal TSH of 1.5 to 3.5 was associated with developing fatal coronary heart disease. Another study found that TSH under 0.4 was associated with the most freedom from thyroid cancer. In animals, a small increase in TSH can cause mucopolysaccharides to form. If you recall from week number 2 and 3, the formation of mucopolysaccharides is associated with initial stages of pattern baldness. Dr. Pete has said, "Over a period of several years, I never saw a person whose TSH was over 2 micro-international units per milliliter who was comfortably healthy, and I formed the impression that the normal or healthy quantity was probably something less than 1. In my own research, I've noticed that those with pattern baldness tend to have higher levels of TSH, along with low pulse and a low or fluctuating temperature." A thyroid supplement is an easy way to quickly correct a high level of TSH. Along with the TSH, prolactin should also be measured. Prolactin levels rise with TSH, and one study suggested that possible causes for basal elevations of serum prolactin include unrecognized primary hypothyroidism and states of hyperestrogenism. Prolactin tends to increase in men and women during aging, and this is so important, I'm going to mention it again. One of the most important mechanisms of the adaptive effect of prolactin is its ability to suppress thyroid function, thus decreasing the metabolism level, which results in the reduction of oxygen consumption. A higher functioning of prolactin is associated with pattern baldness, and in my own research, slightly elevated levels of prolactin appear to contribute to a variety of problems, including hair loss. More recently, a Rational 2014 article on the genesis of pattern baldness suggested that prolactin, thyroid hormone, and vitamin D be investigated as attractive areas of current hair loss research. In addition to TSH and prolactin, total cholesterol should be measured. Unsurprisingly, females and males showed significantly higher levels of triglycerides, the storage form of free fatty acids, and total cholesterol levels. While there are many opinions about what causes high levels of cholesterol, thyroid hormone is needed to synthesize cholesterol into the protective substances pregnenolone, progesterone, and DHEA. In stressed college students, cholesterol levels go up before exams and back down to normal after. The increase in cholesterol is likely a protective adaptive response to increase the formation of the youth-associated substances pregnenolone, progesterone, and DHEA. The understanding that thyroid safely lowered cholesterol levels has been known since 1938. Thyroid administration produced a sharp drop in serum cholesterol in every case. This was accompanied by a rise in the basal metabolic rate. A 2000 paper focusing on symptoms related to low thyroid function found that lipid levels increased in a graded fashion as thyroid function declined. Additionally, the paper confirms that thyroid dysfunction is common, may often go undetected, and may be associated with adverse health outcomes that can be avoided by serum TSH measurement. More recently, Dr. Richard A. Dickey stated, patients who have been diagnosed with high cholesterol should ask their physician about having their thyroid checked. If they have an underlying thyroid condition, in addition to their high cholesterol, the cholesterol problem will be difficult to control until normal levels of thyroid hormone are restored. In addition to measuring the TSH, prolactin level, and total cholesterol, it's important to evaluate your own body for signs of low metabolism. As mentioned earlier, thyroid hormone is responsible for converting beta-carotene, inactive form of vitamin A, into retinol, the active form of vitamin A. When thyroid hormone is deficient, beta-carotene accumulates and manifests as orange palms and orange soles of the feet. Sometimes this effect is most noticeable in calluses. This condition would also suggest a functional vitamin A deficiency, but treatment with vitamin A is probably inappropriate until the metabolism is increased, i.e. the hyperkeratinemia goes away. Additionally, simply evaluating one's face can be an indicator of low metabolism. For instance, here's an adult man with the obese form of hypothyroidism. Note the striking resolution of his puffiness, myxedema, after treatment with desiccated thyroid. Myxedema is the medical term for hypothyroidism. Mix is the Greek word for mucin, which accumulates in hypothyroidism. Edema means swelling. So here's the diagnostic summary, and it's important to note that a small amount of thyroid hormone can increase all of these markers. So if you have a low body temperature, sometimes the thyroid hormone can increase it pretty quickly. A resting pulse rate can be increased by thyroid hormone. Total cholesterol can be brought down to normal by taking a thyroid supplement. For instance, if you had a high cholesterol of 250 or 300 or even above, it could be decreased by taking a thyroid supplement. If you had low cholesterol, you would want to temporarily avoid a thyroid supplement until you could increase the total cholesterol level. This could be done by consuming fructose in the form of sweet fruits, and this would allow the liver to increase its synthesis of cholesterol. Again, thyroid stimulating hormone is quickly brought down by a thyroid supplement. So if it's 2, 3, 4, or 5, or even above, a small amount of thyroid would drastically move that number. Thyroid hormone can also generate more carbon dioxide. It can help you utilize calcium and get it in the bones and teeth rather than soft tissue by generating more carbon dioxide, which is regulating calcium. Thyroid hormone, by regulating mineral balance and also TSH and the other hormones, the protective hormones, would also modify prolactin and parathyroid in a favorable way. Frequently asked questions. How do I know whether to take T3 alone, like Cytomel or Cytomel, or T3 and T4, like Cynoplus? Cytomel, T3, is sometimes useful for assessing how thyroid feels. For instance, if someone has never tried it before and had a symptom and lab suggestive of low thyroid, 1/10 to 1/8 of a 25 microgram Cytomel or Cynomel tablet can cause a quick increase in mood, temperature, and pulse. However, the half-life of T3 is about 1.5 hours, while a combination product containing both T3 and T4 has a half-life of about 2 weeks, which can sometimes be more useful for the long-term suppression of low thyroid symptoms. How do I know how much thyroid to take? Famous thyroidologist Dr. Broda Barnes often started his patients on a combination product containing about 10 micrograms of T3 and 40 micrograms of T4, which is sometimes called 1 grain, or is 1/3 of a Cynoplus tablet. Over the span of about 2 weeks, one should engage in frequent measuring of their temperature and pulse while taking a thyroid supplement in order to assess the effects on the metabolism. Ideally, the temperature and pulse should increase in those 2 weeks. My temperature has decreased after taking a thyroid supplement. Sometimes when the stress hormones are very high, taking thyroid can lower the temperature and pulse rate. Usually continuing with supplement and good nutrition resolves this issue over time. I don't notice anything from taking a thyroid supplement. Sometimes iron overload or a vitamin A deficiency can cause an unusual response to thyroid hormone. Vitamin A deficiency can usually be spotted by acne, dandruff, or thickened skin on the heels, but iron overload is usually only evident on lab tests. iron saturation level appears to be a good indicator of iron status. So now let's talk about the fat-soluble vitamins. And first we'll discuss vitamin D. Unlike the other fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin D is often measured on lab tests, and out of the hundreds of lab tests I've perused over the last 10 years, nearly every balding male and female was deficient in the vitamin. Vitamin D is synthesized from the sun, although a small amount is found in animal foods such as egg yolks, liver, and dairy foods. Like dietary calcium, vitamin D suppresses the excess release of parathyroid hormone, which removes calcium from the bone. Parathyroid hormone plays a role in general aging, bone health, as well as various skin problems, including hair loss. The active metabolite of vitamin D, calcitriol, has anti-estrogenic and anti-prolactin activity. Balding men were found to have reduced bone mineral density, suggesting a higher functioning of various anti-bone substances such as PTH and prolactin. In my own research, it is not uncommon for people to have higher levels of parathyroid hormone. A sufficient amount of vitamin D is the amount that lowers PTH, which appears to be around 40 nanograms per milliliter. The Vitamin D Council, which is a good source of vitamin D information, recommends anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 international units per day. Vitamin D can be applied topically to the wrists, legs, or chest, or taken orally. Now let's talk about vitamin K. Vitamin K is another vitamin that could have a major therapeutic role in supporting hair growth. Sources include liver and egg yolks. However, supraphysiological amounts have a positive effect on calcium deposition in bones and teeth rather than soft tissue. Vitamin K supports efficient energy production, acting as an electron withdrawing agent, helping to pull electrons through the cell to be donated to oxygen. Like vitamin D, vitamin K appears to have anti-estrogenic qualities. In this study, administering vitamin K to rats increased bone mineral density and lowered estrogen. Another study stated that these results suggest a possible novel role for vitamin K in modulating estrogen function. Another fact pointed out by both Dr. Chris Masterjohn and Dr. Raymond Peat is that vitamin K is activated by carbon dioxide. Adequate thyroid hormone is needed to produce carbon dioxide. Carbohydrates, especially sugars, are the most effective macronutrients for increasing carbon dioxide levels. While there aren't currently any tests for assessing vitamin K status, up to 45 milligrams per day has successfully been used in the treatment of osteoporosis. From my personal research, anywhere from 10 to 40 milligrams per day seems to be effective. The first place you might notice the effects of vitamin K are in your mouth, as vitamin K seems to have a profound effect on dental hygiene. Now let's talk about vitamin A. Vitamin A, cholesterol, and thyroid hormone are essential for the adequate production of the protective, anti-stress, youth-associated substances pregnenolone, progesterone, and DHEA. Vitamin A can be a double-edged sword. An increased rate of metabolism requires more vitamin A, while too much can powerfully suppress thyroid function. Acne and dandruff might be two of the biggest indicators for vitamin A status, but fatigue, poor memory, poor libido, vision problems, skin issues, and inadequate sleep might also suggest vitamin A need. In one study, vitamin A deficient rats have trouble producing youth-associated hormones pregnenolone, progesterone, and DHEA. Similar to vitamin D and K, vitamin A acts as an anti-estrogen. Here is a quote from Dr. Peat on vitamin A, liver, and thyroid hormone. Yes, vitamin A and estrogen are antagonistic, and while estrogen promotes keratinization, shedding of skin cells, vitamin A opposes it. Since vitamin A is highly unsaturated, in excess it suppresses the thyroid, so it has to be balanced with the thyroid. The combination is effective for increasing progesterone and decreasing estrogen, slowing the turnover of skin cells and making the skin cells function longer before flaking off. Plug pores combined with a local shift towards synthesizing inflammatory substances foster bacterial infection. Bright light stimulates the production of steroids and consumes vitamin A very quickly. But when the balance is right, the acne clears up in just a day or two. Cream, butter, eggs, and liver are all good sources of vitamin A. When people supplement thyroid and eat liver once or twice a week, their acne and dandruff and many other problems usually clears up very quickly. It was acne and dandruff that led me into studying the steroids in thyroid. and in the process, I found that they were related to constipation and food sensitivity. Like Dr. Pete mentioned, cream, egg yolks, and ruminant liver tend to be the best vitamin A sources. In fact, 100 grams of liver contains about 30,000 IU of vitamin A. If you're experiencing hyperkeratinemia, vitamin A should probably be avoided until the metabolism is increased by eating more food in general, supplementing thyroid, vitamin E, or zinc-containing foods. Frequently asked questions. Should I supplement with vitamin A? It's usually safe to supplement with vitamin A if you're experiencing some kind of skin problem, especially when you topically apply it to your feet, chest, or arms. Liver would be the best way to get vitamin A because it contains an abundance of nutrients rather than one in isolation. Dr. Pete has mentioned that a low thyroid person might only need around 5,000 international units per day. When the skin is exposed to a significant amount of sunlight, or one is using thyroid, aspirin, or good nutrition to increase the metabolic rate, more vitamin A will be needed. I've heard of people using anywhere from 2,500 to 100,000 IU per day to control acne, dandruff, and low libido. Let's talk about the last fat-soluble vitamin, vitamin E. Vitamin E is often characterized as an antioxidant. However, its protective features extend far beyond antioxidant defense. For instance, vitamin E is a powerful anti-estrogen. In fact, when combined with aspirin, vitamin E becomes an even more powerful anti-estrogen supplement. It says here that when combined with vitamin E, aspirin-dependent inhibition of prostaglandin E2 formation was increased from 59% to 95% of the control. Prostaglandin E2 activates the enzyme aromatase, which creates new estrogen. Vitamin E is also useful when a strong oxidant is present, such as iron. 1 to 200 IU of vitamin E per day are generally well tolerated and safe, and can be taken orally or applied topically. Vitamin E is also useful when supplementing large amounts of vitamin A. Vitamin E protects vitamin A from oxidizing and may increase its utilization. Let's talk about the other half of the animal's protein, gelatin. An amino acid that might offer a therapeutic role in supporting hair growth is the amino acid glycine, most often found in gelatin. While often considered non-essential because we can produce glycine from the amino acids serine and threonine, one study has suggested that a glycine supplement should be utilized to maintain a healthy metabolism. Oxtail is one way to get glycine. Pan-frying 2 to 4 oxtails and then boiling them with salt and enough water only to cover the meat for 3 to 4 hours makes a delicious gelatin-rich meal. Another foodstuff that contains gelatin is chicharrones or pork rinds. However, sometimes pork rinds contain noxious allergens and sometimes can even be fried in vegetable oil. A brand that appears to be well tolerated and widely available is the Mission brand. Additionally, Great Lakes makes a gelatin bovine supplement that is suitable for making gelatin candies and sauces. Their hydrolysate bovine gelatin dissolves quickly and tends to be a better option for dissolving in milk, juice, or coffee. Dr. Pete has suggested that up to a third of one's dietary protein could come from gelatinous sources. So let's talk about a controversial supplement, aspirin. Aspirin, along with vitamin K, has a variety of anti-stress and pro-hair effects. However, before we get into them, let's cover the risks of supplementing. While aspirin does temporarily cause the intestines to bleed, it appears that the intestines quickly adapt after about 3 days of large doses of aspirin. For instance, this study confirms earlier results that aspirin is harmful to the gastric mucosa, but that the gastric mucosa shows a remarkable ability to adapt to the repeated exposure to the injurious action of this drug, so that the macroscopic damage inflicted on the first contact is minimized on repeat challenge. In another study, it was found that with continuous aspirin administration, injury was maximal within 3 days and then lessened, i.e., damage present after 7 days of aspirin was significantly less than after 1 day of the therapy. Here are some of Dr. Raymond Pete's thoughts on aspirin. I don't know anyone who has a stomach reaction when they dissolve aspirin in hot water and then take it with food. There are alternatives, such as magnesium salicylate or just plain salicylic acid, which should be used dissolved with food. People using it with cancer usually take a daily total of 6 grams or more. Vitamin K protects against bleeding and other effects of prolonged aspirin use. The benefits of aspirin include protection from stress. For instance, in one study, administering aspirin blunted the effects of stress, e.g., inefficient energy, inflammation, and oxidative stress. In another study, it was suggested that aspirin may become a new drug for the treatment of osteoporosis because of its ability to support bone mineral density, which has been shown to be reduced in the balding male. Aspirin also appears to have antiviral and antifungal properties. In one study, it was stated, "Our results also demonstrate that aspirin possesses potent anti-biofilm activity in vitro and could be useful in combined therapy with conventional antifungal agents in the management of some biofilm-associated candida infections." Aspirin appears to be useful in a variety of conditions, and even in very high doses from 4 to 6 grams for inflammatory conditions. Here are a few more thoughts from Dr. Ray Peat on dosing. "I think a little aspirin regularly, if not daily, is good cancer prevention, if you are sure to get enough vitamin K to prevent excess bleeding. The amount depends on how you react to it, and can change as your metabolism adjusts. Taking some at bedtime can be very helpful for sleeping. Sometimes I take about 500 milligrams at night, but other times just a little. I think the crystals are more stable, but I keep the big container, a multi-year supply, in the freezer, and keep out enough for a couple of months. The powdered forms developed an acetic acid smell with time, crystals don't." Frequently asked questions. Question: aspirin is a drug. Salicylic acid, the main protective compound in aspirin, is also found in nature. For example, orange juice and other fruits contain small amounts of salicylic acid. Question: taking aspirin caused some of my symptoms to get worse. Similar to thyroid, aspirin can noticeably increase the metabolic rate, i.e. the resting pulse and temperature, and nutrients that may be deficient will be needed in greater amounts. Copper and vitamin A are two nutrients that are needed in greater amounts when the metabolism increases. 4 to 6 ounces of liver once or twice a week should cover both nutrients generously. Let's talk about added sodium or salt. Stress de-energized cells accumulate intracellular sodium and rapidly lose extracellular sodium. This hypotonic or sodium deficient state in the blood increases the secretion of aldosterone by the adrenal glands and the fat cells. Consuming less salt than what your appetite calls for provokes the release of aldosterone and releases the brake on the secretion of adrenaline, raising the levels of stress hormones in parallel with aldosterone. Elevated levels of aldosterone are seen in men and women with pattern baldness. This study stated that patients with pattern baldness showed significantly higher systolic blood pressure values and aldosterone levels versus controls. Estrogen, which is also increased in pattern baldness, also appears to increase aldosterone. All three hormones, estrogen, prolactin, and aldosterone, appear to work together to waste salt in the urine but retain it in the tissues. Salt appears to be strongly protective of stress. Animals that were salt-loaded were resistant to stress, while a period of rehydration sensitized animals to immobilization stress. In fact, low-salt diets can induce insulin resistance even in healthy subjects. Here are some of Raymond Peat's thoughts on salt in the diet. Recently, a British physician from Mongolia or northern China studied the incidence of hypertension in her native region, where people consume at least 30 grams of salt per day. That's about 5 teaspoons. She found no hypertension at all, even among the oldest people. In my experiments, it has taken the body only 2 or 3 days to adjust completely to a massive change in salt consumption. Many hormones adjust quickly to retain or release sodium according to the amount consumed, if the person is otherwise well nourished. Hypothyroid people, however, are unable to maintain a normal sodium concentration in their body fluids even when they increase their salt consumption. Here's another quote by Dr. Peat. He says, "I think taste is always the best guide. There are situations in which 30 grams could be therapeutic, again 5 teaspoons, but it's best to let the body regulate by appetite as much as possible." So let's finally talk about red light. It may seem a bit odd, but cycles of light and darkness have a dramatic effect on hair growth. The possible mechanism is that light, as some have suspected, is biologically active and supports hormonal synthesis and efficient energy generation. For example, 90% of hair follicles shift from the resting to growing phase during springtime, only to fall out in winter months. Low-level light or laser therapy has been shown to be effective in restoring hair growth in some individuals. In a long-term, 1-year study in the treatment of men and women with androgenetic alopecia, light wavelengths of 940 nanometers directed at the scalp led to improvements in hair growth and quality. While it's often said that the mechanism of low-level laser therapy's effects on hair growth are unknown,
wavelengths of 600 to 1000 nanometers activate cytochrome C oxidase, an enzyme that occupies the last crucial step in the process of efficient energy generation through the mitochondria.
That concludes week number 4 of Organizing the Panic. As always, if you have any questions, please ask them below and I'll try my best to answer them thoroughly. Also, please email me at dannyroddy@gmail.com if you don't feel comfortable sharing your question below. Additionally, thank you for purchasing Organizing the Panic and supporting my work. It literally means the world to me and it allows me to do the things that I need to do to further research hair loss, so I really appreciate that. With that being said, I really want my ideas to work, so please ask questions if you're confused. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you guys soon.